I don't normally do discussion-based videos on this channel. In fact, I think it's probably the first one. I have a topic that I want to talk about today that I've sort of thought about doing before, but recently I really feel like it's a good time to do it now, especially with like link monsters in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. I think it's a perfect time. The topic that I want to talk about today is the fact that I find the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game far too difficult to get into now. And even to a small degree, people coming back to try and start playing Yu-Gi-Oh again from way back, like they haven't been around for a while, they find it far too difficult. So this is just going to be me talking to you guys. You can listen to my opinion, and then you can even agree with it or disagree with it. I just want to know your thoughts and opinions. If it differs, that's fantastic. That's what we want, a discussion. So let's get started. My name is Sam. I run a YouTube channel called TGS Anime. I mainly focus on the anime side of the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. I don't really play competitively anymore. I used to, though. The last time I played competitively was 2012, so it's been quite a while, and this is now my desk mat, so it's filthy. Back then, Xyz monsters were a thing. We hadn't got to pendulums, and we hadn't got to link monsters, so Xyz was my format when I was playing competitively. And even back then, definitely needed to know a couple things that the average player might not know. So anyway, that is my experience with the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. Nowadays, I just play online. I play some of the automated servers. So as I've said, one of the main problems with Yu-Gi-Oh at the moment is the fact that it's far too difficult to get new players to start playing the game. And there's a couple of different reasons why, so I'm going to break these down into different segments of this video, starting with the first one. Let's break down the fundamental core of Yu-Gi-Oh! For any trading card game, for any card game in particular, what is the essence of the thing that you're doing? So in Yu-Gi-Oh! We both have cards that can deal damage to each other. We both have health points, and those health points can be whittled down by those monsters. The first one to 0 loses, and the person that doesn't have his health at 0 wins. So obviously that is the extremely simplified version. As you begin to expand it, it's going to get more confusing because there's a lot to do with Yu-Gi-Oh that you need to know in order to play the game. Obviously, you need to know things like the life points you have. You have monsters with attack points and defense points. To know how to switch your monsters, you need to know that you can only do certain actions once per turn, but you can do other things. So there's a lot of different things like that, but once you've learned them, then it's not too bad. As well as this, you need to know that there's phases in the Yu-Gi-Oh game. You need to know that there's a draw phase, a standby phase, a main phase 1, battle phase, a main phase 2, and an end phase. And at the moment, everything I've just said so far, they're not too bad. I hope the majority of people that are playing Yu-Gi-Oh, even at a casual level, those are the things that you should go out and understand because they're important and you should know them. Now, this next part is the part where I think the people will really begin to struggle because it's a part of the fundamental core of Yu-Gi-Oh. It's the actual part of the mechanics of the game. If you don't understand the mechanics of the game you're playing fully, then how can you expect to do well and to be competitive and to have fun with a game? What I'm talking about now is timing in the Yu-Gi-Oh game and the speed of which things occur. So what do I mean by this? Well, in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, if I have a spell card, there are certain types of spell cards that will activate before other types, and there are some that can only be activated during certain phases of certain turns. For example, if I have a Mystical Space Typhoon, I can't activate that during the damage step because I will have missed my timing, it will be too late. However, if I have a card that, say, changes the attack values of a monster, it's the exact same looking card, it's just it does something a little bit different, I'm allowed to activate that one because it's got a faster speed spell. I think that would be classed as a speed spell free. Like, counter trap cards, I think, are faster than normal trap cards. I'm saying to this you now, I'm not even that sure myself, and I've been playing this game for a while. I've never been that good at the game, so, you know, grain of salt, just take what I'm saying. That's the kind of thing that I mean. It's problematic. Like, if you don't understand when those things occur, how are you supposed to know? Well, obviously you can research things, you can understand generally how things are meant to go, but then you start getting confused because you start chaining cards. If you activate a Mystical Space Typhoon to destroy something and somebody chains another card, then those cards stack and those cards resolve in the reverse order. So this one goes first, then this one, and in that time period you can make things miss their timing. One card example I think I can use is there is a field spell card called Gates of the Dark World, and its ability is you banish a card in your graveyard and then you can discard a card and then you can draw a card. Now, if I activate that card's ability and I banish a card, my opponent can then activate a Mystical Space Typhoon in response to me banishing the card in the graveyard, destroy my field spell, and that will interrupt my timing and I can no longer discard a card. It's more or less something along them lines. That might not be 100% accurate, but you see the gist that I'm making. I mean, a while ago I used to play a deck called a Malefic Skill Drain deck, and I had Ancient Gear Gadgetron Dragon in the deck with the field spell card Gear Town. And the mechanics of the game was that if I activate Gear Town and I set a new field spell over the top of it, it would be destroyed and I could special summon a Gadgetron Dragon straight to the field. However, if I were to activate a Gear Town face up, the effect of Gear Town would kick in and that would make me miss my timing. That doesn't apply anymore because they've changed the mechanics of the field spell card, so it doesn't work. It was really good back in the day though, so it was pretty sweet. You can see what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of confusion with this, and this is quite difficult to understand, and it's a really big learning curve to understand how this works.
I mean, here's a fantastic example of this. When you buy a new structure deck, you usually get a rule book with them, and this is the page on timing, basically. It's the if you can versus when you can. Cards that say you can do something when something happens, must activate their effects immediately, and it sort of says that. We've got one page to explain this, but when we jump over to the Wikipedia page, we notice that this same page has been expanded into paragraphs upon paragraphs for different examples. And this isn't explained to you straight away. It's something that you have to progressively learn. And that's tough. That's tough to ask for somebody brand new to the game to understand all these different terms, these different things, sequential events, simultaneous events, chain link 2 or higher, activation costs. I mean, this deserves its own The Idiot's Guide video, really, to it, if I'm honest.
What a lot of people will do is they'll play some of the automated games, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist. That'll sort of sort everything out for you because all the effects are being triggered within the game understands how it works despite the fact that you're not. So when you go to locally play with someone in a competitive environment, you might not know exactly how it's going to go, and maybe not even your opponent. So I think this is one of the first big problems with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. In fact, to further support my point, I actually did a survey on my channel. At the time of making this, I had 6,700 votes. 16% of people that voted fully understood the mechanics of timings and speed effects. 58% of people somewhat understood the mechanics, and a whopping 26% just didn't understand it at all. That's bad, really, isn't it? That is a main mechanic of the game, and people don't fully understand it. So, yeah, there's no real way of fixing this as well, which is the problem, apart from just trying to get people more knowledge on this. So, I can't give a suggestion on how to fix this, but making the game more complicated, which we're going to cover in a little bit, is not going to help the situation. So, the evolution of the extra deck monsters, I think, is a little tiny bit of a contribution to putting people off Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I don't think it's a huge problem. So, obviously, if we go back in time, we go back to the first era of Yu-Gi-Oh!, go back to duel monsters. You had normal monsters that had no effects, you had effect monsters that did things, you had ritual monsters, pretty easy to understand, and you had fusion monsters. Fusion monsters, you just had a polymerization card, you just mashed two monsters together, and you had a new monster that was stronger. It was very simple and easy to understand. Decks weren't that complicated, you understood how things worked. We move on to like the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX era, we get more and more fusion monsters. We also start getting fusion monsters that don't need polymerization cards, that contact fusion kind of thing that you get with some gladiator beasts, some of the Neospacians, but they were still pretty cool, and it was okay. That's fine. The biggest moment, I remember the point when synchro monsters got introduced into the game. Just like every other mechanic that was introduced later on in the series, everybody freaks out. They're like, this is going to ruin the game, these are stupid, I don't understand it, it's too complicated. And then you start playing it, and then it kind of makes sense. This is going on right now with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links at the moment. They've just introduced Synchro Summoning, so it's kind of that all over again, but on a smaller degree. But Synchro monsters, we now have Tuner monsters, a new type of monster, as well as Synchro monsters, which is a new monster in your extra deck. So obviously the Synchro monsters, you need to have one of these monsters on the field, and then any other monster, just to be generic, and then you sort of... I always imagine they kind of fuse together as well. I never really understood the essence of Synchro Summoning. I always imagine they tended to like machine parts and they sort of combine together in a different way to fusion, but they make the Synchro monster. Now, that's not too bad. It's essentially just a new type of fusion monster, except they usually had very powerful effects and you can use them as many times as you want. Fast forward a little bit further and then we get Xyz monsters with a new mechanic. We don't have new monsters, but we do have the ability now when you have two monsters of the same level, you place one monster on top of the other one, then you get the Xyz monster. For every unit underneath, that is like how many times that monster can do an effect. That was me pretending they were like floating around it like the Xyz units. So we're starting to get confusing now because there's other mechanics that are involved with the Xyz summons where you can like Xyz evolution. They're not levels anymore, they're ranks. So it's starting to get confusing now. It's like extra things you need to explain to someone that's new at the game. Then we had pendulum monsters introduced. They're my biggest problem with the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, is the pendulum monsters. Not necessarily because of the mechanic. The mechanic did have to change the game around quite a lot, but it's something else which I'm going to cover in the final part of this video. But pendulum monsters got introduced and they were, I think, the worst received of all the summoning mechanics. Obviously, pendulum monsters are half spell card, half monster cards. You can play them in the new pendulum zones, which at first were separate zones, but now they've been fused with the spell and trap card zones, so they're not overpowered anymore. You place 2 down, they have scales. So a scale 1 and a scale 7, you can summon everything in between those numbers, so 2 to 6. Special summon all those monsters to the field if you have them in your hand. If I had like a level 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 in my hand, I can summon every single one of them monsters to the field all at the same time. And of course, when a pendulum monster is destroyed, it doesn't go to the grave now, it now goes to the extra deck face up, so that if you still have the pendulum cards on the field, you can activate them again and special summon it to the field. Now, back then, of course, you could special summon as many of those monsters as possible, even though they were coming from the extra deck, because we haven't got to the Link era yet, but we're getting to that right now. So then fast forward to modern times. Well, I guess not that modern. Links have been out for a little while. With the introduction to Link monsters, where they tried to slow the game down, we now have a completely new board. The fact that you can't summon extra deck monsters to the main monster zones anymore. You can only summon one to the field, but we now have Link monsters that have Link markers. They don't have levels, they don't have defense points, they can't be switched into defense, nor can they probably put face down, I don't think. It's just sort of all these new mechanics that have been added, and the Link monsters obviously have the arrows that you need to understand. You need to know that you can summon monsters into those zones, and blah blah blah. So I have had the luxury of being around since the original series, and I have got to experience each of these ones in little tiny doses so I can understand them. But now if you start playing the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, you've just got this sea of things that you need to learn. You need to understand all of it if you want to play the game, because there's so much stuff that you need to know, because if you don't know it, then you're going to be a disadvantage and you're going to struggle with every single duel. So just before I jump off the evolution of the extra deck monsters, I am not saying that the evolution of the card game is bad. I quite like the innovative style. I would never have thought of the Link summoning mechanic and the way it works, and I'm actually someone that doesn't mind it. I think it's quite good. I don't mind the fact that lots of decks have been nerfed. I don't mind the fact that I'm not seeing like 7 synchro monsters getting summoned to the field every single turn. I know you can't have 7 monsters on the field, but you know what I mean. Well, you can have 5 and then the 2 extra. That's another mechanic, the extra Link or whatever it's called, so you can have 7 monsters. But these are just all things you need to learn. So I'm not saying don't innovate, but don't make it any more confusing. Try and go in a different direction if you can. And the last big talking point that I want to do in the reason for this video is this one. My biggest problem with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game and why it is so difficult to get into is the sea of text that you have to read and understand on cards. What a duel looks like nowadays to someone that's new to the card game. You get given these cards, you'll faintly understand them, you'll play against someone, they'll put a card on the field, a continuous trap card with this block of text, and you'll be like, can I read that card? You'll read it, okay, I think I know what that card does. They'll use something else, can I read that card? Can I read that card? Because you don't know. Back in the day, cards would have effects like Flip Monster. When this card is flip summoned, draw 1 card. Little simple sentence, you say, can I look at your card? You understand it. Pretty simple, and you pretty much knew what most cards did. Fast forward all the way today, there are hundreds of thousands of different cards, and thousands of them that are used today, that people are going to use competitively because they're so good. You'll look at their card and they'll have a paragraph of text that you need to know. If you don't know that, you're at a serious disadvantage. If your opponent summons 4 monsters to the field, each one has a paragraph of text underneath them, and you have 1 card that will destroy 1 monster on the field, you need to read every single one of them to know which one is the most beneficial to destroy, or if another card is protecting another card. So if I activate this card to destroy that one, well, this card's protecting, you didn't read my effects, so you didn't know. And I see a lot of people, I'm a practical example of this, where I'll play against decks online, and I just won't bother reading cards, and I'll activate something, misplay. I didn't read the card effects, so now I'm at a disadvantage. And I think this is the biggest problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion, because you need to know all the card effects in order to play competitively, and you need to understand all of your effects. And I just think there's just far too much text involved. And this all started to me really with Pendulum Monsters, because Pendulum Monsters, they have monster effects which are long, and then they have pendulum monster effects as well. They have 2 paragraphs of different types of abilities that work at different places, and I find that really, really annoying. So the first point of today's video is just for me to vent, really, just so I can just tell you guys what I think the problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. It's still a fantastic game, I still have a lot of fun playing it. I think the artworks are fantastic. I think it is a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed my days playing competitively. I don't know what it's like nowadays, though. I don't know what going to a competitive tournament during the Link era is like. Some of you guys that play competitively, I'd love for you to let me know. What is it like nowadays? Do you find it confusing? How long have you been playing for? Have you been playing for like 2 years? What was it like for you when you first getting started? This topic also got me thinking about another thing. Like, how hard would it be to teach someone Yu-Gi-Oh! That has never played before right now? And so I think that's what we're going to do. I'm going to get my friend who has never played Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm going to try and teach him everything he needs to know about Yu-Gi-Oh! To see if he can understand it and play without me at a somewhat competitive level. Now, he's going to be playing on an automated server, I think. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to slowly teach him. I'm going to teach him on like a weekly basis, where I'm going to start by teaching him as if only Duel Monsters cards existed. The original series kind of Fusion Monsters, Ritual Monsters, Normal Monsters, and Effect Monsters. We may even split that up, I don't even know just yet. So he's going to give that a week of play, get him to understand it, and then once he's understand that, we're going to move on to the Synchro, to the Xyz, to the Pendulum, oh that'll be a hard one, and then to the Link Monsters. I want to see what his reaction is going to be to learning each one of them, see if it is possible, and I think that's the best way to teach people the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game now. I think if you find someone like a little brother or a friend that you want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh!, I feel like that's going to be the best way to teach them. You teach them slowly, each mechanic, and you sort of bring it into them slowly and surely. So that is what I'm going to do over these next few weeks, and if you would like to watch this series, then I'm going to put this video in a playlist. I'm going to put all those videos in a playlist, so give the playlist a follow or just subscribe to the channel. It should be interesting, but yeah, let me know what you thought of this video in the comment section below, guys. I'm sorry if I rambled a lot, I tend to do that, but I didn't really write a script. I just put some little talking notes on this piece of paper, which wasn't well thought out. I really want to know some of your opinions, guys, on some of the things I said. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you have any solutions to put forward that Konami could implement to sort of help introduce new players into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game? Because it's a tough thing to get into. And the best types of games are the games that ease you in. They start simple, but you can play them and understand them, and as you sort of progress, you can get better and harder than them. Whereas I think Yu-Gi-Oh! You're kind of jumping in the deep end with this game. There is no shallow end. So yeah, I wonder if I can prove anything with this series. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, catch you later. Bye.